Who is the greatest man in America? You see, this was a question posed by a New York Sun reporter in 1894 to the people of the Alaskan frontier. And according to W. Russell Webster in his magazine article, Hal Rowan Mike's a Hero from 1999, they had one answer for him. Why, Mike Healy. But who was this man, and what was it that made him able to stand above all others in the minds of the Alaskan people? In this presentation, I hope to show you a little bit of who Mike Healy was and what his legacy has been in the military and in the Coast Guard since. As a preview of this presentation, I will be getting into Healy's birth into slavery and his early life and schooling, his controversial career as a revenue cutter officer in the Civil War and in his Alaskan service, and the continuing impact he has had on both the military at large and the United States Coast Guard. So, in order to understand Healy, we have to go back a little bit to 1839 in Antebellum, Georgia, where his father, also named Michael, and his mother, an enslaved person who was legally owned by his father, had 10 children, of which Michael was the 5th. You see, as the children of a slave woman, they were legally property to the state of Georgia and the United States government as a whole under the Dred Scott decision. And according to Catherine Reef in her book, African Americans in the Military from 2010, most of Healy's brothers joined the clergy after their father's Irish Catholicism. And after his parents died in 1850, Michael was expected to follow in their footsteps, and he was sent to Holy Cross for 4 years. But after 4 years at Holy Cross and the prospect of being sent off to France to join a seminary there and become a priest and spend his whole life within churches, Healy ran off to join a clipper ship and join the Merchant Navy. Now, because of that, we don't have a whole lot of records of Healy from that point when he joined the merchant fleet and 1864, but trust me, there's plenty of history where the record picks back up. So in 1864, during the heart of the American Civil War, Healy showed back up in the United States in the North and volunteered his services as a sailor to the United States Revenue Cutter Service. Now, the Revenue Cutter Service was a predecessor service to the United States Coast Guard and held a lot of the same law enforcement and customs missions that the Coast Guard does today. Healy was commissioned as a 3rd lieutenant with his commission signed by Abraham Lincoln, but by the time he actually got into service aboard a cutter, the war was essentially over. He was first given a command after rising through the ranks of the service, according to Webster's article from earlier, in 1877 on a cutter outbound from California to the Alaskan frontier. Alaska was newly purchased as a territory at the time, and because of that, they had a whole lot of setting up infrastructure to do. And the only government employees out in Alaska to carry mail or to do really anything at all were the Revenue Cutter Service at the time. Healy was in 1885 given command of the Revenue Cutter Bear, which would make him famous. The Bear was the first ice-breaking capable ship in U.S. service, according to J.M. Kiela in her journal More Than 9 Lives from 2018 on the history of the Bear. And Healy was a huge part of what made that ship worthy of a whole article to itself. He was given the name Hell Roaring Mike according to Dr. Dennis Noble's journal article Hell Roaring Mike on Trial, and he gained the respect of the Alaskan people by his ingenuity and his expansion of the revenue cutter's job beyond the normal customs and law enforcement roles into areas like search and rescue that didn't really exist in the Alaskan system at the time. A great example of his ingenuity was when the Alaskan village on King Island was starving due to overhunting of the seal population. Healy took the Bear across the Bering Strait all the way to Siberia and loaded, and it's a little hard to see, reindeer onto the ship, paid out of his own pocket. The government did not pay for any of it. And brought them back to King Island and started a breeding population that was so successful that the U.S. Congress started replicating the program in other villages that were suffering from overfishing and overhunting. And and that's all according to Catherine Reef again in her book African Americans in the Military. Now, because of his old-fashioned way of commanding and the drinking he did along the shore, his nickname of how Roaring Mike came around to bite him when new officers out of the Revenue Cutter School were sent to the Bear and turned him into the Treasury Department for court-martial, according to Dr. Noble in his article, How Roaring Mike on Trial. Now, that court-martial essentially ended his career, being found guilty on all sides, and while he did continue in the Revenue Service after that, he would die a year after leaving the service, mostly as a footnote to history in San Francisco in 1904. So, that's a great historical narrative. But what does it mean to us today? Now, today, we don't have a Revenue Cutter Service. We have the United States Coast Guard, which is a military branch now. And because of that, Healy was the first African-American officer in the United States military. The United States military wouldn't be desegregated until 100 years after Healy joined. And so, seeing an African-American officer at that time is a real turning point for military history and showing how the equity-minded military and diverse military of today started its formation. Now, alongside that, Healy was also involved in beginning many of the 11 Coast Guard missions through his ingenuity. According to Webster again, he was an integral part of starting the ice operations that the Coast Guard has taken up more and more since the Titanic disaster, and began the humanitarian aid and natural resource management missions with his King Island expedition and the Reindeer. And thanks to all of that, according to Kaya's article, the Coast Guard named in 1999 the Coast Guard Cutter Healy, which patrols the same waters that Healy once patrolled aboard the Bear. And now, what does this all mean? Where do we go from here? You see, Healy was anything but a perfect man. But through his ingenuity, through his caring, and through his undoubtedly effective methods, he was able to change the trajectory of an entire military branch that today numbers over 40,000 people and millions, if not billions of dollars worth of equipment. And I hope that in recounting the details of Healy's life and his legacy, that you've been able to see through his birth into slavery and his death in obscurity, that even if you're nothing and you're forgotten, you can make a difference in history. And if anything else, the next time your fishing trip gets ruined by a Coast Guard inspection, or you see a daring rescue on television, at least you'll have a little bit of a historical footnote of how we got to this point. Thank you.